Welcome to the New Shores podcast. I'm your host, Tim Harrison. On this episode, I sit down for a conversation with percussionist, drummer, and educator Rosendo Leon, more commonly known as Chen Dee. Chendy Leon is most definitely a citizen of the world. Born and raised in Cuba, Chen Dee was introduced to percussion by his father at a very early age. Having to live with the oppression of a regime that initially promised freedom and justice but failed to deliver on those promises, Chen Dee dreamed of being free to express himself musically. With a belief in the opportunities of a wider world, Chen Dee took the dangerous step of coming to Canada as a refugee, bringing with him the sounds and stories of the Cuban people, as well as, eventually, his parents and beloved dog. Chen Dee is an incredibly in-demand musician and sideman in Canada, as well as a percussion instructor at Canada's highly respected Humber College. From making homemade cowbells from the bumpers of rusted American cars to inspiring young musicians looking to express themselves, Chen Dee brings a story still unfolding in our midst. Recorded on July 21st, 2017, in the lounge high above Privet Studios in downtown Toronto, here is my conversation with Chendy Leon. Chen Dee, thanks so much for taking the time today. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Tim.
Welcome to the roof of Privet Studios. My home studios are named after my cat, so this is Privet Studios roof garden, as it were.
Excellent.
To start, you and I have only just recently met, and we met through a mutual friend, Marito Marquez.
Absolutely,
who's a fantastic performer, big fan of Marito. And he had done the podcast previously and said, there is this guy that you have to talk to. He's like, you really need to talk to this guy. He's fantastic. His name is Chen Dee. I want you to meet him. And I said, sure, that's great. And then we happened to cross each other at Marito's birthday party.
That is correct.
And he was very excited that we got the chance to meet there. And you were very kind to accept my invite to come and talk and share your story. So thank you very much for that.
Absolutely, and thank you for allowing me to, be part of your project and have a voice in your stories.
Fabulous. All right. So you are Cuban, correct, by descent?
That's correct. I was born and raised in Cuba.
Okay.
Yeah.
So tell me what childhood in Cuba is like. Like what are the experiences, the sights, the smells, the sounds of Cuba as a child? What sticks out in your mind? What are your memories of that?
In my experience, it was a beautiful thing, and it comes down to the story behind the Cuban population, which is African and European, mainly from Spain.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a happy kid, and I'm still a happy person because of that, because it's important that we have a happy childhood, experience. And it was absolutely amazing because I was involved in this mix of amazing tasting food, from both cultures, from both traditions, mixed now in just one under the name or the Cuban. But so food is it's a very strong an important thing in Cuba, as well as music. And such a strong one that when we describe something and we're talking about music, in Cuba, we use terms from the cuisine, from the kitchen, to describe how good that music is. We refer to a good, well-sounding music or band. We go like, wow, that tastes amazing. That has such a beautiful taste. And we're referring to music, to sound. But it has an amazing taste. But because we relate good things always with the kitchen, always with the good tasting food, With you say a pickup line to a lady, a beautiful lady walking on the street, or a girl when you are, young as well, you use terms from the kitchen, you know, and you say like, you know, you must taste beautiful, you know, but it's in a way it's just saying like you look beautiful, you know, you're not talking about eating that person. It's just like we use a lot of terms. So, you know, you smell like, just the same way that we would say you smell like a beautiful flower, you know, you're so pure. We refer in with terms of the kitchen. So I grew up with all those things around me, music all the time, and good, amazing smelling food, that from my grandpa to obviously mothers, you know, women, they would know how to cook.
Wow.
You know, really well. So.
So taste is, and still is, it seems, very, very important to you in your language of how you reference the world.
Absolutely. I think I have learned to accept other ways that humans has developed all over the world, you know, especially, let's say, for instance, this city where we live in, like Toronto. It's a very cosmopolitan, if I may say, city where there's hundreds and thousands of people from all over the world. So I have widened my views and my acceptance, you know, but it is still important. Absolutely.
Wow, it's interesting how you say, you know, as we would compare to a flower, you would compare to food, and naturally I would think, of course, everybody compares everything to a flower, but not in every culture, right? There are different cultural touch points and references.
Yeah.
So how did you, in your youth, what was your exposure to music? Is your family musical? Is everyone around you musical? Is that also part of the culture, in that even if you're not a musician, you are still very much affected by music?
That is correct. Yeah, in my, you know, my story is that as far as I remember, since I was inside my mother's womb, I'm always been a musician, because my dad was a musician. He's still a musician, and my mother was and she still is an excellent dancer, and also related always to the music scene and music jams within the family, music, you know, shows and things like that. She would, as a young person, she would go and dance with her dad to these places where people now, we call them, well, I don't know if we call them anymore, discotheque or dance floor or whatever, a club, right, where people go to dance. Those existed in Cuba, and then she would go to dance with my grandpa, her dad, and she became an excellent dancer. And she's not a musician, but she can play the rumba and the son clave and be perfectly not crossed, you know, with the clave and the rhythm that is going on with any particular band playing on the radio. So as far as I remember, I'm always been a musician. I discovered the passion for music since, you know, when I was very little. According to my parents, when I was 4 years old, I think I did show them that that's what I wanted to do. And my dad started then introducing percussion instruments, such as the bongos were the first ones to me.
And what does your father play?
He plays bongos and congas and a version of the timbales that we play, but they're called timbalitos, and it's just the smallest size of the same thing that you see in 13, 14 or 14, 15 inches timbales, but they're small. I believe there are like 10 and 12 or 10 and 11 inches.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Why do we have the larger size here normally then?
That's, well, I think they became more like appropriate for the kind of music that we nowadays play, which it's under that big umbrella, whether it is the Cuban music umbrella or the other umbrella of the same Cuban music, because it's exactly the same, but it's called salsa.
Okay.
And I think it's the instrument, the sizes they started going, like, you know, growing bigger and bigger, because the volume of the bands also started
Oh, okay.
becoming louder and louder. Things got now all of a sudden plugged, you know, and then electronically pushed, you know,
Right.
as opposed to just one mic in front of the whole band and everything going through that, and then placement of the band was an important thing back in the days for bands in general, not just in Cuba, you know, in the States too. I'm sure they were doing exactly the same thing. But I think that's the story behind the timbales. Although they came from another instrument, that it was not always how we look at the timbales today. It was like type of a timpani, a small version of timpanis. Yeah, and then they started, I believe, trying different shapes with, you know, I guess the makers cut the bottom of the timpanis, and then they became this thing that they started calling them pailas. Pailas. And I think timbales, I'm not sure. I'm researching on this currently because you might know or might not, but I've been a teacher at Humber College for 10 years, so I truly want to be as prepared as possible for when students, they have all these questions and they want to know about you know, what I've been exposed to, where I'm supposed to be coming from, and what I'm supposed to know. So
what you're supposed to know is, you know, is your experience.
Yeah.
Whether you have all the answers, at least you're willing to go and find those
Absolutely.
answers and look and learn yourself. Right?
Exactly.
There's a lot of teachers who will just say, well, you don't need to know that, or it's not important, go look it up yourself,
Yeah.
or sort of protect their knowledge base and say, well, it's not important, or here's a generic answer.
it is true.
But if you're willing to go and investigate and learn more, then you're bringing more to students, right?
Yeah.
You're giving them the benefit of your experience, and you're constantly learning. That's a
Absolutely.
great experience.
Yeah, if I may say that, to me, that is really important, even just for my personal experience. And I respect a lot the fact that I've learned a craft, something that our ancestors, you know, they brought, not in the best way, because they were forced to come to new lands, do something else, you know, and I'm talking about specifically about African people, you know, that at some point of human history, they were took from their lands and brought to do, like, you know, forced work or hard work, you know, for other people. But they brought all these immense and rich cultural, you know, and again, it goes back to food, you know, and music, and within music, dance, you know, as well. It's part of that, and I always try to pass that to other, whether it is a colleague that I'm talking to about music and they're interested, and or a student. And a student, I always look at a student as a chance for me to also learn. I'm always a student, even though when I'm supposed to be teaching someone or passing info. That's how I would like to call it. Passing something that I know that perhaps you don't know and you want to study with me, and I'm passing you information. So history, it's part of that. You know, it's important to me.
That's great.
Yeah.
I'm very comforted hearing that, right? Because there are people whom I know who have had very bad experiences with teachers who have been very didactic, and you know, they teach you what they know, and that's sort of it. There's no exploration. There's nothing that takes you beyond.
True.
So it's great to hear that there are people out there who love to have that experience, and learning from each other, and you know, experiencing those things together is great.
Yeah.
You know, there's more to be discovered that way than there is,
That's right.
you know, somebody trying to, you know, enforce some kind of, you know, isolated knowledge that they know, and that's it.
And that's it.
Well, that's great. So what styles of music were you listening to as a child? What are your first musical memories?
I remember a lot listening to the music that my dad and mom were, you know, listening through either radio or the turntable, vinyls. And I do remember listening a lot to one artist a lot, which was Benny Moré. It's one of the most incredible singers that Cuba has always, you know, had and still have, because his music is gonna live forever, and his presence, his name, and that was a mix of at the time it was called guaracha, or which is the same. It's complex because just the name changes as a few new elements or ounces of influence from all the music are mixed into that way of making music, and then what it used to be called zone evolved eventually to something else and to something else, but it's the same formula now, just with added stuff, other elements. And then perhaps musicians felt the need to call it differently, or even bands, as they were trying to be unique, they were calling their own style, perhaps, of the same music, but it was called guaracha, which is the same as salsa, son nowadays. And then I believe also boleros. I did listen a lot to boleros, to cha-cha-cha, from one of the most important groups in Cuba, which is Orquesta Aragon. Unbelievable musicians, unbelievable writing. They could take, and they're still around, but they could take, especially the original leader, a standard piece and make it into a new piece, such a, with a beautiful arrangement, fresh, and such a unique version of the original, which it was already a great, version, but it was unbelievable what this band was capable of doing, especially with under his lead.
Wow, that's. I'm excited by your excitement of that. Like, it's not music that I have a great history with or a huge experience with, but your excitement of it is making me want to learn more and to understand more about that. That's fascinating.
Those two artists already, you have tons of music to go through, to go and listen to Benny Moré and Orquesta Aragon.
Okay, nice.
There's plenty more, but I'm just giving you those two for now.
That's a great start. That's a great start.
And that was my exposure. Those, I'm talking about them because also I mentioned them because those were the ones that my dad would listen the most to at the time.
Nice. So the cultural experiences of Cuba when you were young, younger, sorry, was what was the general sense of life there? Was everybody comfortable and happy in their station in life? Was everybody feeling? Was there a sense of being isolated from the rest of the world? Did you live comfortably within a specific sphere of Cuban society? In North America or in the world, we sort of look at Cuba as a very isolated society, a very protected and stricter society. How did you feel that way? Was that? Did you sense that?
I did, and I'm gonna give you my experience, which
Please.
It could be different than another person that was born and raised in perhaps the same town or a town 10 kilometers away from mine or a different province of the island. So in my experience, I did, again, it is an island, and the island teaches you something that there's separation because of the sea. You still united, to all the lands by the sea, and you can still travel, but it's not as easy as pick up and go and start walking, and eventually you will end up somewhere. When you have the sea all around, it's different. You have to get onto a boat or something that floats and hopefully get somewhere else. So it is a different process, and therefore you help all the ones. You integrate yourself to a society whether you are struggling or not. Because you get to know, because it's the biggest island of the whole Caribbean Sea and region, but it's an island, and you get to know all the people pretty much within your village, within your town, a lot of people, even within a big city like Havana, you still meet a lot of people and see them every day, and perhaps keep meeting new people. But there's a point where you're so connected to a lot of people that, you know, even within a big city, and because people are so outgoing, and they're, even if they don't know you, they say good morning to you, they open up, and then perhaps there's no friendship, but there's a relationship that definitely that starts developing, right? So you have this sense that you know people, you get to meet people.
Wow.
So that, and the fact that the moment that you're oppressed by someone else, you only have one direction, which is to, how do I get rid of this? How do I make my life better? How do I learn to do things better, so the no becomes perhaps a yes with limitation, but a yes with limitation, right? So I did feel oppressed through my childhood, you know, and then teenage years. It was worse, you know, really like more relevant to me that I understood what was going on, because the fact that is, and the reality is that the revolution, it's a system under communism, or that was the system put in place by the president at the time. Later on, became a dictator, and that's my opinion. But that's what happens when someone, any human, try to stay in power. Whether they are perhaps good, I doubt, but any dictator, it becomes not good to people when it forces himself onto, you know, the power, and because he doesn't want to let go, he wants to control that. So it was a tough situation. You know, it was a very hard situation, because the moment you start being conscious of all the issues and you start asking questions, you were shut down by whether it was your family says like, shh, you cannot talk about that, you cannot express that out on the street, because you never know who's listening to you, and you can end up in jail. And from jail you can go just like far worse. You could die. They could kill you, you know. Many people died at the beginning of that revolution, even though it needed to happen, and it was true that it was for a good cause, but it got corrupted right away. And they started doing exactly what the people before were doing. So they were no good.
Right.
After a year or so, they started killing people for political reasons that were against that revolution and against what they start seeing coming at them under the you know, the description that the leaders of the revolution, especially Fidel and his brother, they started saying. It's like, this is a green revolution, and we're trying to get justice to people, poor people, and, you know, and then you're going to choose your president, and none of that happened. And this is all on YouTube. I'm not saying any lie, I'm not exaggerating, this is my story, but this is all on YouTube because it was captured by cameras at the time, his first speech. And then hopefully, like, that things were going to change for the Cuban population, and they did change, but they got worse. Little by little, start going backwards. Right? So growing up, it was difficult because there were no access to things that you could have gotten interested in on, you know, like this instrument. We don't sell that instrument. There's no way to get that instrument. Well, how about to go and study Cuban music at school, which is another thing that it's like nowadays it doesn't happen. In Cuba, it's recognized as this amazing fountain of knowledge of their music. And you would think that back in the perhaps 60s or 70s, those 2 decades especially, the first thing that they would teach at a music school in Cuba was Cuban music and rescue all the Cuban music, and it wasn't. It was based on Russian, classical music.
Okay.
That's what they would teach at music school. And
Hmm.
they would catch you playing any kind of popular music, phrase or element or something like that, on the piano or any other instrument. They would kick you out of school, and they will report you.
Wow.
And we're talking about a country that is so rich in this, culturally in this, area,
Right.
that you would think that that's the first thing that you want to support.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
But that would be anti-revolutionary, right? Or would that be considered anti-revolutionary?
well, to stand for the right of defending the music that your grandpa and you saw your dad playing, and to stand against the government, it was a tough decision for most people, and you would end up like not achieving anything and probably thrown in jail.
Wow.
So people would play around with the system and try to convince and change them. And I think that some people did actually in Cuba. Some Cuban musicians, some teachers, eventually they got some of the people that were in charge of taking care of the education board, which not necessarily they knew what they were doing, but they reflected the interest of the revolution of the leaders, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think things changed. In the 80s, that was already part of the past, but other things, were still around, and, I was thrown in jail for 5 hours just because I was not even walking, I was traveling in the bus, got out of the bus to let go of people that were getting off at that bus stop, and then a police officer just grabbed me and took me to a police station because he wanted to interrogate me because I had my hair was long. Long
So
hair.
how old were you at this point?
I was probably 17.
So at 17
18.
years old, you're getting off of a bus, and you're sort of standing back to let other people off.
That's it. And get on the bus again, and there's a cop just walking by, and then he sees this long-haired young person that rather doesn't look like a good Cuban, because for them a good Cuban has to have had a look in one way. Whether it was, I don't know, because that kept changing through all the decades. You couldn't wear jeans because jeans was a thing from an American point of view. Jeans were like this thing that all those American people, they wear jeans. We have to wear different kinds of shoes and different kinds of pants and different shirts. Everybody has to look the same way because this is the revolutionary way. This is a good way. Those are evil. You couldn't listen to the Beatles, American music at some point in the radio. You were thrown in jail if someone catch you, and then they report you on the phone to the police. And then that got removed. And then everybody was listening to popular music from outside the world, and not Cuban music anymore was played in the radio. So you would have these up and down things with the government, probably, and people in charge of all these institutions not knowing what to do.
Wow.
And doing awful things.
So tell me about this experience where you were thrown into jail. So you got off of a bus to let other people off, and then a police officer just decided he didn't like you, didn't like the look of you.
Probably. That's exactly
And then
right.
just took you to jail. There
Jail
was
for
no
5 hours.
explanation.
No explanation.
Nobody talked to you about it?
No, the guy couldn't even read my ID, because I give him my ID, and he says like, so where do you live? And he goes like, well, officer, he says right there, I live in San Antonio. I'm just traveling from Havana to my town. And what do you do? It's like, well, can you read everything it says there? And I was already working professionally. I was a musician already, working with bands. I've never done that I was conscious about anything wrong in my life. Got into trouble, hurt someone else. Always try to do the right thing, even though I might have failed at some point because I didn't know better. But that's all I was doing. And then the guy just got pissed off with me because, he got upset because I was responsive. I was like giving him these answers and asking him rather than him asking me.
Mm.
And then I said, why are you taking me to the station? He was like, oh, you have to come with me. And then he threw me in there, and then he started insulting me as he put me in that cell. He started, because he wanted to, I guess, find a reason. Perhaps there was a benefit behind all that.
Mm.
I don't know. I've heard stories about police officers, perhaps here or in other countries, if they report many tickets by traffic, infraction, then perhaps they get the rest of the afternoon. I don't know if that's correct or not, and that's fair or not. I'm not trying to say that, but I think there's some kind of benefit to some activities that officers might do throughout the day, and then, I don't know what he was, but that would repeat with any other young person in the island. And whether it was long hair or your appearance, you would always, if you were not looking the way that they are trained and brainwashed by the government, you would then be, looking very different. And therefore, we have to investigate you. What's your mind thinking? Why are you looking like this? What are you doing?
Now, so this was happening to others. What were people's reactions to that? I mean, obviously it's frustrating and it's scary and it doesn't make any sense, but did it become just commonplace? So it just happens, you're like, well, I was thrown in jail again. Was it like that, or was there a building up of frustrations and people were getting angrier and angrier and angrier about that kind of behavior?
True. All that you said, all that happened, and it started happening. And I think it started happening more often to most young people. And then also the frustration started building up. But there's no place that you can take that frustration with that government, because they're not going to listen to you. Even if you do it in a passive way, they're not going to sit together across, from a table. And then you honestly saying to them, I think this revolution is doing all these things wrong. And why are you doing these things wrong? And then you have to listen to the young people, because they were young at the time, and they took things, under control in a violent way. And I don't agree with that, but they felt that they needed to do that, and they did it. And that's why the Cuban population, which it was always betrayed and abused by every single president. It's not only Fidel that has created a dictatorship and for 50-something years. It was the guy before, Batista, and the guy before. True is that all of them, they did social work, and they built stuff, for the society, things that were needed at their time, But there's no way, no place to take that frustration, simply because, especially this last regime in the island, had and still creates a sense of not trusting other people.
Okay.
Because the simple fact that from the very beginning of that revolution, they had all that in mind, and they orchestrated this very, very well, and they created what they call Comité de Defensa de la Revolución, Committee of Defense of the Revolution. And what that means is that they put per each block, on each street, on each village, each town, each city, a house reporting for the government, reporting locally for that police station, and that police station represents the government and represents the same ideology, the same regime. So if I'm the one that was given that role, I'm watching you, and I'm watching that what's going inside your house, that it's not within the allowance, of what you're supposed to get.
It's not revolutionarily approved kind
Exactly.
of thing, right?
Exactly.
Wow.
You got a new car. And how did you get a new car, Tim? because everybody knows everything. And I know that if you work for, let's say, a radio institution there, that everything belongs to the government, by the way, then I know you get 100 and something pesos a month, which is, it's pretty much nothing. And so how were you able to get a car? So you are investigated right away. You are reported to the police.
Wow.
You showing new clothes and no one else is showing new clothes because no one has access to new clothes. Do you have a contact? Do you know someone, foreign country or some kind of black, meaning under the table market, black market, So, and those things were illegal. Always been legal. Have a piece of meat in your fridge without a receipt. Don't dare to do that. Because if police knock your door and they how do you call when they come and they search your house, right? And they found something that you were not supposed to have, you better have a receipt for it, although otherwise you go with them to the station. That's it. And I'm not exaggerating to you. That's some of the stories of what the Cuban people have gone through all these years of revolution that shows itself differently outside.
Now, why does this continue, this pattern, why does that continue to happen in Cuba? Like over, several different regimes, as it were, going back, a couple of hundred years maybe, or 100 years.
In many other places of the world, yeah.
Why does this continue to happen in Cuba? What is the cultural significance of that kind of dictatorship, happening over and over and over again?
Right. I think that the reason why it continues to happen is because they destroy in the first place the trust in the Cuban population, to trust to reunite, rebuild, stand for something, go out on the street, and them destroying that sense of, you have that right. That right was removed from people because you wouldn't dare to do that.
Right.
You will be gone the next day or the same day because they will go grab you and you're gone, and your life becomes hell. In the island because everything is controlled by them, right?
So you can't get away from it.
You can't get away from it.
Right.
And remember, it's the sea. Even your passport were removed from you, at some point. This was my experience and many of the musicians in the island. Perhaps things has changed nowadays, but you wouldn't get your passport until you got to an airport in Cuba, the airport in Cuba. The representative of that institution will give you a passport, or the leader of the band, and then you do your check-in and all that. You travel. Let's say you go into France. You check in France through customs there, and then you get your passport back once you give it to the officer, and then say merci beaucoup, and then you go and you go for just 15 days on a tour. That representative of the government in that tour, which is doing nothing and nothing else than watching everybody, and that no one stays outside Cuba. In most cases, it happened like that for many years in Cuba. People would travel, someone doing nothing with a band. Who's this? It's not even related to the band. Oh, it's just the representante, the representative of the institution, the cultural
inside
institution.
Cuba.
Inside Cuba. And then not inside Cuba. When you go outside Cuba.
Okay, all right.
When you travel locally, no, that's
because they already
there's
have
nowhere you're
anyway.
gonna go. You're just going to another town, play, and come back, or another province.
Wow.
But outside Cuba, you will be given your passport at the airport in Cuba. You travel, and once you get to your destination, it will be taken away from you.
Wow.
So people could not stay because that means all of a sudden you enter legally to that country, but you're illegal.
Right.
Without a passport.
Yeah.
Plus all these stories of fears, you better don't stay, you guys cannot stay, because they always fear that, because that means that people can talk outside Cuba about the real situation in Cuba. That's why they caught Cuba from the outside world. That's why no one can watch any of the news or any station as you wish, because it's your right to choose what you want to listen to in the radio, what you want to watch on the TV. If you wish to go to Panama or to Miami, it's just because you've never been, and it's a right of of any human, because we are travelers in the first place. Removing all these nonsense and very superficial thing that I am Cuban, you're Canadian, he's American, all that, it doesn't make sense to me. But even accepting that, there's no reason why you would ban and prohibit anybody from doing that if they have the finances, to do it, and lock your door and walk away and travel and then come back within a month. You couldn't do that even. The moment you saying to the government, I'm moving, I'm going to another country, they take possession of that house.
Wow.
And if you stay legally in any country and then you apply for whatever under, what's that called, refugee status or whatever.
Or a request asylum or something.
Right? That gets notified to the island, and then whatever property or something, anything, it will get confiscated by the government. Unless the family would do something prior to that. But you had to do it so many years, because that's the other law that the government did put in place for Cuban families, not to pass a property to other ones, because they like to punish people like that. You could have not give your house to your sister, let's say, if you had a sister, because you wish to move to China. And now by moving to China, that means you're not going to live in the house. What good is it for you if you're away now all of a sudden? But you don't want to lose that house, because you never know how things gonna go in China, right? Or in Russia, and then you want to leave it to your sister. That's it. You sign it over. This is your house now. You could have not done that.
So they hold that over you.
Yeah.
You know, if you leave, then we're taking everything that you own, so that if you even tried to come back, you would have nothing.
Yeah. And yet again, you still dealing with them if you wish to go back to see your siblings, even though you're so far away from that. Now that you stay in another country and you start from scratch and from zero, this fresh life and opportunities. And again, no government is perfect, right? Under whatever the name, the title, the communism, capitalism, this, that, because it is controlled, and somehow it is by human beings. And we have a lot of issues to resolve, and through history, we haven't been able, and we're still fighting over any religious saying, or this piece of land, or that other thing, or these rich, resources, right. Exactly, right? Yeah. So anyways, when you wish to go back to Cuba, you have to ask for permission to the government. You have to ask for a visa, and they can still deny you. My parents were denied.
Really?
For 5 years.
So tell me about that. So obviously at some point you left.
Yep.
And your parents left. I assume you left with them?
No, I left before, because I came with a band, and then it was just a tour that was supposed to take place within 15 days.
Okay. So tell me about that. Tell me, what was the band? How did you end up in the circumstance where you were touring? Give me that story. I'm very curious.
I came in 1999, in July 14. I just celebrated
your anniversary?
Yeah, 18 years in Toronto. In
Fantastic.
Canada. Yeah, which is great. This is home for me. So I knew I was going to stay.
Even before you got here?
Even before I got here, because I was convinced and already had it in my mind, and it was clear that I was going to stay anywhere I would go outside that island, because it was my first trip.
Oh, wow.
It was the first one.
And how old were you, if you don't mind me asking?
No, of course not. 26 years old.
Okay, wow.
So it just happened that I didn't choose to come. Obviously, we didn't have that right to choose like where I want to go to tour, especially as a sideman. You're working with a band, and whatever the contract that show up, and that's a band that's should consider, themselves fortunate when you get a contract, a tour line up to go to travel outside Cuba, because everybody would fight for that opportunity because you would get a break, you would go to places that you haven't been, you would all of a sudden have a chance to grow as a human being. Because information allows you that, whether it is bad or not, it is good information or bad information, but it's up to you to recognize it and accept it or challenge it, right?
Right, yeah.
So anyways, I traveled with that band, and I knew I was going to stay. I stayed, no doubt. I stayed, and I came with nothing. I came with nothing, just a few pieces of clothing, and like $40 in my pocket, I believe. And then I needed to pay that ticket that I used to come, and it needed to be purchased like two-way tickets because I didn't want the government to, realize that why are you going with just one-way ticket to Canada if you're going for 15 days tour, work. And so anyways, it's a long story, but to give you the short version of the story, we all showed up here. The band came a few days after me, and a year and a half after, I was able to provide my parents with the opportunity to come here too.
Oh, wow.
So they came, and they also applied for the status here, refugee, status, just because we all went through different situations at each of us with the government. My mom also was taken to the station, the police station. So we all have stories, and real stories. Just because someone broke into a factory in Cuba of cumin and oregano, and apparently they stole a lot of that food and that spice, and they were trying to find who did it. And then for whatever reason, my mom and my dad, at some point in the 90s, the government, through all these up and down changes, and they allow people to open their own business, if you want to call it like that, at your place or any local that you can rent or have. And then my dad and my mom, they put this thing about like what could be considered today fast food, but it wasn't. It was homemade food right there in front of your eyes, because you would order a sandwich with something, with let's say with an omelette, with cheese and stuff like that. Because at some point then food started coming back, and you would have local, especially in the countryside, farmers, and there will be a farmers market that would supply some stuff, and you can buy from them, and then you can sell, and you can perhaps come up with your own recipes of things, and then people would become interested about your cuisine, your kitchen, and then come and spend some money in your dishes, So someone comes by, which was an agent of the government, and then he's pretending to order something, and then he asked my mother, like, do you have any cumin or oregano that you could sell me? And my mother goes like, no, I really don't have to sell, but I have some. Would you like some? I can give you some, because that's what we used to. The neighbor doesn't have salt to cook, and she goes like, Maria, you have some salt that I can borrow from you today, and I'll give it back tomorrow, or I'll give you this other ground provision or something. And yeah, sure, here's the salt. And you are accustomed to share everything and what you have and what you don't have with your neighbors and your people, right?
Yeah.
So apparently this guy just went back, and he goes like, well, she's not selling it, but she definitely has. So she must have bought it from someone. People walking on the street, tengo comino, tengo oregano, I have cumin, I have oregano, and you buy it. Sometimes that stuff, because you're not gonna just go without food. You're not gonna let your family go without food, without eating for whatever, a day or so. No, you're just gonna reinvent the wheel again, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and make it.
Right.
And that's the will that has support, and that's what has allowed Cuban people to still be happy, be comfortable with life, even though it's, you know, it's not a good life.
Hmm.
And then you have then again all these institutions like the you know, forces, police, the army, the government. They're all their messages always on TV, on big, you know, walls like revolution, live forever, and Che Guevara, which is another character that young people don't even know about what this guy was capable of doing. And I'm not even gonna get to, because this is about talking about many things and not just one subject
Yeah,
with
that's
you,
fine.
right? But
Yeah.
and still people have to put up with all that, but you find a way when you go through struggles to, you know, make it through.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And at the end of the night, people are perhaps a little bit hungry or not hungry at all, but happy, and then they get together at a corner, they playing dominoes, and whether you're drinking an alcohol type of drink or not, or just water, you're having fun with your friends there and listening to music or the radio, and some other kids, every kid in the block or in the neighborhood playing together. No one is afraid of that kid playing with not with that other kid, or not touching, or not, no. You all grow up and you all have issues, and then the next day those issues are resolved, and then your friends you again, you know. So it is that
Because there's
life.
more important things in life.
Yeah.
You know, and it's
You know?
you're trying to make the best of a situation where you can't change it, so you live as best as you can inside
right.
of it.
Excellent way to describe it.
Wow.
And that situation actually give me the opportunity to learn skills. My dad taught me to make my own drum heads. And that's a
Really?
lesson. Yeah, and we would do it from X-ray film.
Really?
Yes,
That's
X-ray film.
fascinating.
We would go to the hospital, and then they would throw away all the X-ray film once they are already used,
Mm-hmm.
and they have these person X-ray, you know, they cannot reuse it because you cannot, I guess, print another X-ray on the film.
Right.
So they would get rid of it, and then that's exactly the same film that drum company use for our drum heads.
That's fascinating.
And my dad says, like, this is the way you do it. Come, you know, with repairing shoe glue.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that you have to find on the black market, or the illegal market, I would like to call it. You know, that you cannot just legally go to a store and buy it. It's from a factory that people work there, and they repairing shoes, or working for the government repairing or making new shoes, and then you buy from them a jar of these glue, right? And then a metal rim that you would make yourself, or pay someone that has access to metal and metal work and all that, and then you make your own. I did my drum heads, my entire music life in Cuba, I made them.
Wow.
And my own cowbells from the fender of the American cars. I used to
Really?
do it. I swear to you.
That's amazing.
My sticks, my claves, all those things.
Okay, this may be a silly question. Do you think that they sounded better than cowbells that you would buy today? Did they have something special about them because of what they were, or was it just, this is what I can do and I'm good with that, but now that you have access to real instruments, that was sort of makeshift and not interesting? Or is there something about that still, something about, it's a fender of an American car and I made it and I can make music with it? Is there
Right.
something still special about
There's definitely something special about that, because in the process of making that, it's a skill, like I said. Like, you learn to do something, not to be stopped by any situation. You goes like, forget about it, I'm gonna make it. So your brain, you still feeding your brain, and most importantly, as you have all this energy that you don't know sometimes how to control and how to displace it to do something good, because you can really do with that same energy something wrong and hurt someone and do silly things and stupid things, you know what I mean, and really get into trouble and hurt other people. But if you direct that good energy into something like that, even though you have all these walls that come up, it goes like, can I do this? No, you can't. can I say this in this lyric that for this new song? No, you cannot do that. They would not play the song on the radio for you. Can I buy a new pair of bongos? No, you can't. You have to buy them reused from used from someone, and those are like old bongos. You know, the new ones that perhaps were made by now within the revolution factory, they were horrible instruments because they didn't have quality control.
Oh, I see.
And they were horrible instruments. The ones that were made before the revolution in Cuba, they were still going around the island, but no one would sell them because that's your only pair of bongos. So you would take care of that and repaint it and clean it and never let go of, because it was something precious, right?
Wow.
So definitely there's something really special in that process of making an instrument or making an element that you can play music with. Absolutely, no doubt. That it sounds better, I think I define better as you know, the style of music that you're gonna use it for, the song, if the song really requires a cowbell sounding with this pitch or this other pitch or this note, you know. And definitely I would give good credit to things built in the past, because there was such a quality to them that they still remain around us. How many of us collect something that is from the past rather than the current one? Because the quality control nowadays seems to not to be there and not to be a priority for makers, you know. And perhaps back in the days everything was done by hand, you know, and it had that amazing quality, right? So I think it all depends. I think right now it's also great to say that if you using a cowbell or a stick that it has some specific, you know, details about it, you bet that you go back and then you can find that same one, and it's almost gonna feel 100% the same. You know, a cowbell is gonna sound the same because now they have access to machines that they would make exactly the same cowbell with the same pitch, and it's not gonna vary in sound. So, and also that I think that's something really good when you want to count on that. Your old cowbell broke and you want to replace it and you have a session tomorrow, you bet that if you go to the store, if they have it, you're gonna play and it's gonna sound the same, right?
Right. Wow. I love the idea that you're making your own cowbells out of an American car's fender.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, there's a beauty to it, there's an art to it, there's a craft to it.
Absolutely.
But there's also kind of a sadness to it, right? In that that's what you have to do to be able to produce music, right? And that means that there's one less fender for a car where you can't import anything, right?
Yeah.
Wow, that's absolutely incredible.
Guitarists, they would make their strings from electrical wire.
Really?
They would last shortly, you know. They would not have a long life,
Right.
but they would, and nothing would stop them. It was like, oh, another one broke again. Okay, gotta go and make that string again, peel it off, you know, the whole thing, and then cut it. But it's like that. While at the same time, some musicians that perhaps they were living in the city and they had access to contact with the outside world, or some musician from another country, they still could have access within the same period, access to original stuff, good quality stuff. Not everybody was going through that situation. But the fact that you couldn't go to a store and buy it, that was equal to everybody, right?
Wow. So what was your experience when you first came here? What, like, obviously as somebody who's never had to go through that, I mean, I don't even know what my first step would be. What do you land and just say, I would like to request asylum? Or do you get out of the airport and look around and see what's here and then, you know, try and figure out where to go? What did you do? What was your process?
Yeah, well, I was scared because first of all, I was coming from a land that you feel like scared all the time because am I doing the right thing? Am I saying the right thing? Am I wearing the right clothes? I don't know if I'm gonna be, you know, where am I gonna nap today? So I kept that in mind. although I was like really so excited in that plane because I was traveling by myself first when I came, not the rest of the band. The band came after. And I was so excited because I made it out of that island, even though I love the nature and have nothing against that. And to me, I would celebrate my entire life until I die. Those cultures, the African culture and the Spanish culture, you know, and they shaped me. They made me who I am, you know, through my parents and my experience and the people that I met. And I would never detach from that. That's who I am. That I feel like that I am Cuban, I'm not too sure about that because I'm first human and I'm a traveler. And I don't stop myself from yes, I am that. No, I am a person. And first of all, I have to have respect to you and treat you with respect. And then all those boundaries or borders, I don't agree with that so much, but I respect them. They're somehow they bring order to the world because we are a crazy bunch, right?
Yes.
And I accept that.
Yeah.
Right? But when I came, I didn't apply right away at the airport because I wanted to have a sense of what was the best way to do it because I didn't know if they were gonna send me back right from the airport.
Oh, I see.
Right?
Yeah.
Because you never know. You never know if there's an agency of the Cuban government working in I don't know, many places because you hear stories. The Cuban government or any government secretly, when they want to remove someone or bring it back because they've done something or they know secrets of that government that they're not supposed to be, you know, shown to the population, the public, they could extract that person without the news or anybody knowing. And I've heard stories, the Cuban agency, the whatever they're called now, I forgot all that, but agents, they have removed people from here and made it back to the island.
Wow.
Send it back. So you gotta be cautious because I also heard stories, and this is true, and I have a really good friend, I met him here, that he was chased by one of those agents because he realized that this person, my friend, wanted to defect here in Canada, and he was chased and was trying to be force him to go back to the plane. But he ran and got somehow the attention of an officer here, and they couldn't touch him. Once he was guarded or, you know, protected by Canadian officers, they couldn't touch him. And they said, and that plane is not leaving until you bring down his luggages and whatever things that belong to him. So, and they could get really nasty when they really, you know, want to do that, you know.
So your first fear is that anybody could be against you when you're landing.
Exactly.
So did you play the gig?
I did play the gigs. Yeah. I did play the gigs. Yeah. And I wasn't gonna damage the reputation of that leader for that band because he was not looking at staying here.
Okay, all right.
So first human and then my personal staff say, no, you gotta be, and I was honest to him. He knew what I was gonna do, but I said, but I'm a young person. I cannot deal with this situation in Cuba anymore, and I need to get out of here. I need to see the future. I need to be in charge of my future, not someone else saying what I should do with my life.
Right.
So, and then he respected that, and he helped me, in fact. I cannot say the story because...
By all means.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
He could get in trouble, but he... I worked with the band until the very last day that the band sent my payment to the government with him because they would take 90% of your payment so he wouldn't get in trouble. And then he can say, I don't know what he did after. He just disappeared, and which it is true. That's what happened. I disappeared, you know, here, and tried not to relate them to my story and what I wish to do here. So I did apply after a few days, but right away I knew. And being Canada, the first place, it was by coincidence. That's where the tour was bringing me to. I always had Canada as one of those countries that, first of all, it was beautiful. the land, because I do remember watching what we call adventures, like a TV series, Aventuras, of it was called Danger Bay. Remember that?
Yes, I do.
And that show
Yeah.
such a beautiful scenes of I think it was BC
It
perhaps.
was, yeah, absolutely.
And I said, oh my goodness, I wish I could live in a place like that and have access to all those resources. Look at those lakes, look at that sea, even though I have nothing against the Caribbean Sea and all that, and I loved it, and I enjoyed it pretty much every weekend in my life. I would ride my bike to the sea, even though it was like 25 kilometers away, but it would, it would be accessible like that.
Right.
So I dreamt about Canada for many years, and then finally I get a job at a hotel in Cuba, and it was not a national hotel, it was an international hotel that was getting a lot of Canadian traveling there and staying at that hotel. So I met a lot of people from here, and carefully I talked to many of them, because also you were prohibited to talk to people, but because we were part of the entertaining and training staff, the members, so we would play music and also entertain people in a way that we would be integrated and interacting with them, whether it was a game that they were trying to display by the pool or something at nighttime as part of the show with the music.
Right.
So I had the chance to talk to people, and they would say, it is a beautiful country. And then, by the way, we're not Canadian, we came from Yugoslavia, but I didn't know better because I didn't know how to recognize different accents, English accents.
Right, yeah.
So to me, English all sounded like the same, from whether you were from England or from Canada or from the States. I do recognize a little bit because of the American movies, the cowboy, right? Like that Western, right? Southern accent, right?
Yeah. Huh.
Through cowboys figures, So, and so Canada was my number one in the list, not really the States, because I was not a fan of the States and the things that the U.S. do things in the world in the name of democracy, and I would never agree with that. Although there's beautiful people in that country, amazing story, and culturally it's rich. The same thing again. Lots of food, lots of great music, jazz, all the stuff that came and led into jazz, in New Orleans and New Orleans and all.
And influenced by the Caribbean sounds
absolutely.
that were coming out of Cuba.
Absolutely,
absolutely.
Yeah, wow. A lot of Cuban musicians made it to New York and formed that whole scene that now it's called the Latin jazz scene in New York, but it was at the front of that movement were a lot of Cuban musicians, and they were the ones that brought Cuban music to the States, as far as I know.
Wow.
As early as, I don't know, the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, even before that revolution, people were making a decision to move and go somewhere else.
As well as bringing his story and his perspective on the world, Chen Dee also brought his bongos. It took very little convincing to have him do that which he loves, sharing his passion for the music that moves him. Here is a small glimpse of that experience. From high above the streets of downtown Toronto, here is Chendy Leon. Look for part 2 of my conversation with Chendy Leon via the New Shores Project website, newshoresproject.org. To learn more about Chendy Leon, please find him on Facebook, and you can also get more information at Humber College's website. For more information on the New Shores Project, of which Chendy is now a contributing artist, please check out newshoresproject.org or at New Shores Music on both Facebook and Twitter. Thank you for checking out the New Shores podcast, Scenes Edition. The podcast features conversations with musicians, producers, educators, and artists who are passionate about sharing their stories of shaping new sounds, experiences, and ideas. Look for new episodes including the NSP Live Special Editions featuring performances from notable artists.